wanted to share an idea I had around the 2008 CrossFit Games, and fixing some of the programming using performance scoring. So, 2008 CrossFit Games, you had 4 events. The first event was chest to bar Fran. I believe the second event was a couplet of deadlift and burpees. The third event was an 800 meter run up the hill and back. And then the fourth event was squat Grace. Now, what was interesting is they took the times for the first 3 events, added them together, and then the differences between athletes on that aggregated time told you at what time you got to start squat Grace. So basically whoever had the lowest aggregated time started on second 0, and then if you had 10 seconds of total time for the first 3 events greater than the first athlete, you'd start 10 seconds after, and so on and so on. And yeah, pretty cool kind of format. Jason Kalipa kind of famously won the games that year, starting mid-pack and just smoking everyone. But it did massively affect the programming for that games, because everything had to be on the same time domain. You couldn't have one event that was long or one event that was particularly short, because that would obviously weight the time available. For example, if you had chest to bar Fran, deadlift and burpees, and then a 10k run, the time differences in the 10k run would basically influence the handicap, which is in some ways a bit of a shame, because this, I guess, handicap staggered start idea for a finale would actually be pretty cool. And so I wondered if there was a way of fixing it, and a way of allowing event organisers the ability to basically start people at different times. So you have a finale where everyone starts with some handicap representing the performance up to that point, and then whoever crosses the line first wins. Kind of cool, because often you look at finales for events and you have to do some arithmetic to go, who's winning, who's losing, how much does so-and-so need to win by to win the overall event. In this format, whoever crosses the line first wins. So what I wondered, you could basically weight the time differences by how long the event is, but there's a lot of choices in that. It's kind of difficult. One thing I did wonder is if we could use performance scoring to basically enable this. So performance scoring, you have a score from 0 to 100 for each event, but the score you get represents your performance relative to the rest of the field. I've given a bit of an example here. So for the squat Grace, Jason Kalipa won in time of 2:46, so we'd give him a score of 100 in that event. Someone that finished 2 seconds back would basically get 98 points, 98.4, and so on. Someone who finished in 3 minutes, which is 180 seconds, you'd see them win. You'd award them 88.5 points. So what the scoring is doing for us in this instance is it actually just converts between time units and units of scores. And so I wondered if you could do it the other way. The performance scoring I'm using here, it's kind of made up just for the sake of this example. It's not as well thought through as some other performance scores. Maybe I could get to that at some point. I kind of used one similar to how Decathlon does their scoring. So you have a calibration parameter, so this 0.45, that just tells you that basically means the person with the fastest time gets 100 points. The 300 says that anyone who finishes in 6 minutes or greater gets 0 points. The 1.1 shows us how progressive or regressive the scoring should be. So if that power is 1, it's going to be linear, so every second will basically represent a point, or up to a fraction. And the higher that power is, the greater the discrepancy is, the better you do. It doesn't matter for the sake of this example, but what I did is over here, I just kind of generated some random results for 20 athletes based on 5 events. So you can see here, for example, athlete 1, 100 points in event 1, 20 points event 2, 80 for the next event, 100, then 100, for a total of 400 points. And then person in second place, 55 on event 1, 75 on event 2, 76 on event 3, 64 on event 4, 97 on event 5, 367 total points. So they're back I can't do the numbers in my head, about 33 points. 33 points back in total coming into the final event, which in this instance we're calling squat race. So you can imagine if this were a typical event, we'd be saying, hey, like they have half a chance if the athlete in first place does really poorly, but probably not that likely. Difficult to do the numbers, especially if the top two athletes are kind of mid-pack, to work that one out. The way the numbers work out here, we normalize the total points by the number of events, so essentially divide that by 5, and then we reverse engineer the performance score. So this formula is the inverse of the formula I've put into this cell. So we divide by the 0.45, take the root of 1.1, subtract that number from 300. The number is not too important, but that kind of gives us a starting time for every athlete, and then we can just base the handicap off what time the first athlete's going to go. So what we do is we say, hey, like this point discrepancy represents 8 seconds for the event, and then the third athlete, who's 5 points back of second, is going about a second and a bit after the second athlete's going. The athlete in fourth, who's I think 18 points back from the podium, they're going to go about 5 seconds after. And in this context, we're looking at a rep every 2 to 3 seconds, very roughly. So that probably represents quite a bit. So there's the idea. We can play around with a couple of different choices. So in this example, I used 6 minutes as the time cap. We could do a slightly different example. So we could assign scores differently with a tighter time cap, 240 seconds. And what that means is that the handicap for the same scoring for these athletes would be 4.5 seconds. So there's a bit of choice that the programmer has, or the scorer has, in what the time cap is and how you assign scores, and that's actually going to impact that. So probably a little bit to think through here before we kind of put this into practice, but it's an interesting idea nonetheless. And then I worked through a third example, so using the standard as the finale from the 2019 Games. Matt Fraser won that. I can't divide 485 too quickly, but I think it was about 8 minutes 15 seconds or something like that. So you'd assign that 100 points. In this example, because we're just using this to work out handicaps, it doesn't actually matter too much where the 100-point mark is. But what we can then do is then say, hey, let's use that as the finale for the same set of athletes and results. So athlete 1 goes off 0. The second place athlete, who's, I think we worked out 33 points back, they'd go off 43 or 44 seconds in this case, which is pretty substantial, but not insurmountable, depending on how everything plays out. And it'd be quite an exciting race to see. Someone has 5, maybe 10 snatches to make up in the finale, and to see if they could go touch and go and try and put a bit of pressure on the first place. And then the third place athlete, is going 6 seconds behind, so pretty close, and you can just see that race progress as the event unfolds. So there's the idea. Let me know what you think. Obviously there's a lot to be thought through in terms of how you do the scoring, what event you do this for, and particularly how you select the time cap. But the basic premise is that you can set everyone off at a time reflecting their total performance up to that point in the event, and then have a finale where the person who wins the event is going to win the overall competition, and the person who comes second, and so on and so on. So that could be pretty cool. So there you have it.